Hello, welcome
Hi.
all. I'm Stephen Robinson. I am with the lovely and talented Robyn. Please kick us off with great news on the.
1 second. Stephen, do you know how to pronounce my last name?
Of course, I do. I actually. Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh, that is
But you can go ahead now that you've made me feel self-conscious about it.
it's Pennacchia, like Pinocchio with different vowels.
I know. Yeah, it's Pinocchio with different vowels. So,
Mhm.
so Pinocchio.
Yes. No, Pennacchia.
Like literally, if you were like, my name is pronounced Pinocchio with different vowels, and Gracie Allen would say, "Oh, Pinocchio with different vowels," but it's
Yes.
but now on to Amazon.
All right. So we have our first Amazon union ever. Cheers.
Cheers.
Um, it is an incredibly big deal because now that one Amazon warehouse has decided to unionize, basically they're not going to be, it's going to be a lot harder for them to prevent other Amazon warehouses from unionizing because you can't, it's really hard to do union busting once there's already one union and people
Mhm.
are like, hey, why are those people getting paid more than us? Why do they have better benefits?
um, and as I recall, it was I guess Amazon, the gentleman who did this, Amazon did not think highly
Yeah,
of.
Chris Smalls.
Yeah, it was a leaked document, I guess, from
Yeah.
internal from
Oh,
corporate.
yeah.
He was not articulate, and obviously he's not going to get anywhere. And he's a big dumb black guy. Not saying that, but all sort of under the level. And
Yeah,
that,
no.
that turned out to be the case. It
And
actually.
then he just destroyed them. And I love it. It's beautiful. Like, I love it when people like get shit done out of spite.
Well,
Like,
I mean, Amazon, those guys, the folks in the warehouses and doing all the work, that's what allowed, when you think about the coolness of Amazon, it's those guys, or men and women, anyone who works in those warehouses, more specifically than very well compensated executives in Seattle and elsewhere. I mean, this is not anything to bash tech executives, but they were the ones working comfortably in their homes during the pandemic at
yeah.
no to their health or so forth. Whereas the reason people were like literally able to get diapers, I mean, so
Hmm.
the first few weeks of that, people were risking their lives to do this. And, Amazon, obviously, to the extent they talk about protecting workers, they could have prevented all of this by actually, God
Just not treating
forbid,
their workers like crap and letting them go to the bathroom.
yes. So it's kind of they pushed and they pushed, and sort of this is kind of like, well, no, like why we have nothing to sort of show for it at the end of where we went for. In case anyone was unfamiliar with that specific incident or case, can you talk about the about not?
Okay, well, there was an issue both with Amazon delivery drivers not being able to go to the bathroom and having to like piss in water bottles. And then there were like also issues with the people on the floor having to do the same thing because they weren't being given breaks. And they any time they took off was like docked against them. It was very Triangle Shirtwaist Factory. Luckily, no one, died in a fire, but they were really trying to limit breaks. And there was a lot of pressure on the drivers, especially to get things done really fast. And yeah,
Yeah, I
there
mean,
was people could not go to the bathroom.
I can't speak for everyone, but I'd be okay as a Prime member with 2.5 day delivery if
Yeah,
people are able to urinate when they need to urinate. It's it's just such
yeah,
a um but it's and again, I think those stories bring out like this is when you're praising Amazon, and it's usually like when their overperformance is their big thing, and it was like, oh, this is awesome. Well, here are the folks who are paying that price. Again, it's not.
mhm,
I mean, granted, their policies towards even their executives were well compensated and can urinate, but they have no
yeah,
work-life balance. Terrible. Um, but people really do pay that price, which leads to a slight tangent. I promise we'll get back to it. But there's this TV show, Bridgerton, and it's sort of, I have a issue with any sort of romanticism of classist society, of inherently aristocracy and so forth.
I
Even
haven't actually seen Bridgerton yet.
well, I mean, the idea is like, oh, well, here's
Yeah,
this
I
romantic
understand what it
period.
is. Yeah.
Your Darcy character is played by a black man, and there are black women who's like the lady of, whatever. And aside,
Yeah.
that wasn't reality. But even so, like that, the suffering to enable the lifestyle that we still pretend to enjoy seeing is tremendous, to the point of we need to actually show more of, like the in Ireland with like the workhouses and just the brutal. Whenever I would visit the Biltmore House, they would show, oh, this is great, and they get up and they would dance. But here's what happened, so that the useless lady can have the lovely gown in time for a party. A woman would get up at 4 a.m. was like cleaning clothes to her fingers bleed, and then die, from light poisoning or something.
Yeah.
35, like a miserable human existence.
Well, the thing is, so much of classism in general, like both like social class and economic class, has to do with invisibility and wanting people to be invisible. Like my house has a stairway in the kitchen that it's not my house, sorry, it's my parents' house that I am staying at, but I'm not a rich person with a house. What kind? I'm a millennial, we'll never have houses. But there's a stairway that, when the house was built, was just for the servants, so no one had to see the servants going up the regular stairs because they were supposed to be invisible. That door goes to the kitchen. The door was shut so that you didn't see the people making your food, so that you could pretend that, their labor was invisible. And people don't like to know how their sausage is made, both because, it's actually really gross to watch sausage be made. I've done it, but because it makes you feel guilty. And, then you're like, oh, it took someone's dying to make me a dress.
Yes,
that doesn't feel good. And so part of like privilege in general is ignorance. Like that's when you look at most privilege lists, it's stuff you don't have to notice. Oh, sorry.
Reinforcing that privilege doesn't help, right? Like it just doesn't. Romanticizing, reinforcing. To me, it's like we're clearly still in a horribly classist society where people are peeing in, cups to give us stuff that we want, and that is invisible to us, and to their suffering is invisible to us. And to me, and I've been accused of being a killjoy about this, I just find, and I'm someone who I love all this stuff. I love the Jane Austen books or all this stuff, but I just, when you romanticize that,
and I love Sonda Rhimes.
Yeah, you are, it's not, the problem wasn't just that it was like, oh, well, the Duke of Asshole could be a black guy as well. It's like, no, it's inherent. And I think that was, again, a slight tangent, was when everyone was stunned by Meghan Markle's treatment of the royal family, and how the people who are really into the royal family in England, because there's also people who don't give a crap, the people who are really into it did not treat her well and clearly preferred Kate. And they're like, well, we're stunned. And it was like, well, you understand this is an inherently racist institution. No, it's not. I mean, it was like, well, I mean,
they're white people by sheer coincidence.
Well, I mean, generally my rule is white people who inherently believe that they are superior to you, probably assume that they are superior to me.
Yeah, fair.
Like that's a sort of fair, so the idea is like, hey, I'm the black queen. And of course you get like the people who love the queen and whatever and love all the royal family are looking at this and just like, well, this is all BS now. If and everyone's stunned that someone like either Prince Will, whatever, was wondering if their lineage would have a black child and what that would be. And it's like, oh my goodness, how could he think this or whatever? It's like, well, because their whole thing is based on lineage, bloodline and lineage. And if it's just like, you go from Queen Victoria to
When
someone.
y'all had the blood disease or whatever, and the weird chins, right?
Yeah, yes.
Hemophilia. I don't know why I couldn't think of the word hemophilia. Wait, no, is that it? Yes. Sorry.
Yeah, I believe it is someone in the comments can let us know.
I know, I'm an idiot. I know it's a blood thing. Hemophilia sounds like you love blood. Yeah.
No. I think that's when you can't not clot.
Yeah.
For those that
No, that is when you don't clot.
Those of us who grew up in the 80s are very familiar with hemophilia because it became a big thing.
Yeah, Ryan White.
But now, I mean, the invisibility is just very true. I mean, what was happening in those spaces was awful. And so it's great that this is happening, and potentially, I mean, granted, they're going to, the union folks will insist
He did. That is correct. Yes. Alexei did in fact have hemophilia. Not one of my favorite of the Romanovs. I like the fake Romanov that was never born. Or I like the lady who said she was the secret baby of Nicholas and Alexandra that no one knew about except for her. She was living in Georgia, actually, I believe.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Where you're from. Had a southern accent and everything, I think.
Sorry. I think I'm sure Amazon management will insist that a unionized workforce will result in a ridiculous prices.
Oh yeah, higher prices for you. Yeah, the consumer.
Which again, I should not have. Maybe I shouldn't be able to buy this for $20 if it means someone can't. Like someone's literally pissing on themselves. Then maybe I shouldn't pay $20. Maybe I should pay $23 for it.
Maybe that's what it's not worth that.
Or their executives should make. I mean, they make a lot of money, and a lot of it has resulted in.
Well, the thing is, they don't fuck over their workers and pass the savings on to you, the consumer. That is it's a very, very American belief to like cling to. They're like, okay, they fuck over these workers, they pay them nothing, they use sweatshops, they use literal slave labor in the case of chocolate and cocoa and diamonds and a lot of other things. But they do it for you. They do it because they don't want you to pay a lot of money for Nikes.
No.
That's why they're so cheap.
Bezos is literally going into space, just like how there was no like mom and pop plantations. They were clearly like incredibly wealthy and profiting off it's obvious that they are ridiculously profiting off this. But Americans are sort of, they do fall for that kind of class journalism. Maybe it's the idea of like, I too could be a billionaire like Bezos.
Oh yeah. Well, no, there's the whole temporarily embarrassed millionaires thing. But the thing is, especially with things like clothes, people didn't used to have as many clothes as they do. And I realize I am a person who contributes to this problem, but in a way, but I'm really trying not to be. The fact is, clothes are actually so much more expensive to make ethically than we pay for them. Like, we should not be paying what we pay for clothes because someone is getting screwed. There's no way that this is happening and someone is not getting like screwed labor-wise.
Well, and we're conditioned to treat them as disposable. So we just have way too many clothing. We need an entire room for our clothes, even though there are people who don't have a room or a home. But in our country, it's like, even though a few miles from me, there's someone living in a tent, I need an entire room devoted to my clothing. And the thing
is, we have to keep American wages, like for a long time, we had to keep American wages low too, because, the companies didn't want to pay people here that much. So we're basically making it so all around the world, and including here, everyone has to get paid shit, and no one is getting paid enough to live except for like a small amount of people, in order to keep this going and like keep it afloat and like keep the prices down and keep everything down. Because if you made things ethically, the people that you pay unethically here, or that aren't in that business wouldn't be able to afford them. And that's, sort of the conundrum that we are in.
Well,
but at the same time, they also they don't charge more for things than they can actually get. Like, you're not going to make any money if you're selling things that people aren't going to buy for, $100 for $100. And like, you can only charge what the amount that people will buy, or the amount that people will spend. And so we're basically at a very weird point, labor and wage and everything wise, where things are starting to balance out in some areas, and some people are starting to get paid more fairly and other people are not. And that's sort of why we're having a lot of discrepancies in terms of, affordable food and clothing and everything else.
And a lot of that, Amazon contributed to this in Seattle, and then all of Silicon Valley, in the tech industry, the tremendous income inequality and happening very quickly. So a lot of people with lots of money came to Seattle from generally Amazon related. That brings the cost of housing up, but it's hard to kind of create affordable housing. A lot of, especially in New York, some of the, I lived in an old tenement building. You live in an old build, you can't build a building that's 60 years old with like very old appliances or whatever. It's like the cost of this is going to be about the same if you're starting from scratch. So it became very hard. So a lot of these people, and as you were talking about invisible people, the complaint you often hear in Seattle and San Francisco, some in New York or whatever, is I don't want to see poverty. You don't want to see, well, you don't want to see the wound. So it's like if income inequality is like a wound, a gaping wound in the system of very well-off people and people kind of standing by, and then a lot of people, it's like you're going to have folks on the street. That is a result of that. They have to go someplace, and it's supposed of like, okay, well, either I pay more in taxes or I donate more, we do stuff to house people or create systems to bring people off the street and help those we can. The reaction is that it's a aesthetic issue. It's so offensive, and so they want to criminalize poverty. Eric Adams, have you been following that, where he's like, they're kind of coming in and do the whole thing of like sweeping people's stuff up, getting, essentially, because they don't have, they're actually treating them worse than animals, where there would be kind of like, if there was like a lot of coyotes or something somewhere, you wouldn't just come along and it'd be like, oh, how do we do this and humanely do something with the coyotes? And like a lot of well-off people would be like, you can't do this to the coyotes. Here it's like, well, no, just
because there's always the people who are like, I care more when animals are hurt than people. And that's just like a weird, I don't know, I always find those people a little weird. Like,
yes, they like animals more than people.
Well, no, it's not the liking part. It's the like, I've heard a lot of people say like, oh my gosh, if I see like a dog on TV get, hurt in some way, that bothers me way more than seeing like a person get hurt. And like, I don't know if that's good.
Mental deficiency, right? That's just not how our mind's supposed to. Isn't that like you're a psychopath if that's happening?
I think so, but people also seem to think it means that they're like extra good people for that, and I don't really like, like it's one of those things that people say like to be like, hello, I'm a good person, or I'm superior in some kind of way that you don't totally get because you're an idiot. It's funny.
I don't get that at all. But yeah, it's the solution of like, what do we do with these homeless people? And there has to be a solution. It's not.
Well, the least expensive way is to literally house them.
Yes. And there are some groups who are doing some great work. I'm involved with a group in Portland at Transitions Project that does great work with housing folks. And often it's just as simple as keeping someone off the street in that period where they lose their homes. Either if they're evicted, and there's a lot of that coming up late, potentially if you're evicted, and you're not, because to be able to get a job or to be able to get access to certain things, you need to have an address just to be sort of in the real world and system. Just temporarily, that gap can mean everything. Because again, once you're on the streets to be able to get back. We sort of deperson people pretty
Yeah.
quickly in America. So once you're there, the ability to get back is very difficult. No one wants
It's
to hire.
basically impossible. It's pretty impossible. People don't realize the amount of steps that it actually takes to get a job. You do need to have a home. You
Mhm.
need to have a place to shower. You need clothes to wear. You need to be able to get to that job, transportation wise. A lot goes into it. It's not like, you can, even if you're like, got half of your shit together, it's still very, very difficult. Like, you have to sort of figure, how am I going to actually do this? It costs money to have a job.
No, I'd agree
Uh,
with that as well. That, well, as Adrian said, our society has trained us to believe poverty is somehow earned by your deficiencies, not by your circumstances.
oh, exactly. Yeah. Because like we know that the bad people we can tell who's bad because they're poor. It's very Calvinist, actually. Like, it's very like, okay, God makes the people who are good rich and the people who are bad poor. It's prosperity gospel.
Yes.
And that's very much like sort of this country's whole vibe since the beginning.
Very Calvinist, and because no one wants the fear of like this could happen to me. If you ever talk sort of often the average American and someone had
Yeah.
use no term reversals, it has to be, oh well, they put their money in this they shouldn't have, or they
Mhm.
married this person and they shouldn't have. There has to be a reason that, and you could
Yeah.
avoid it if you did the right things, as opposed to no, the world is somewhat absurd and unfair and boulders fall on people, and it's not about whether you deserve what happen. Things can happen to you. And
Yeah.
also if
Well, I
you
would
do,
say that like being a Republican in general, the rule is like nothing bad can ever happen to me unless I bring it on myself somehow. Like nothing bad is ever going to accidentally happen to me unless it involves an a gay person, a trans person, or someone who is woke.
well,
Which like
and it's willful ignorance, right? They
yeah,
somehow then will say, when it's someone close to them, and it's like, oh, my friend who's gay lost her job because of XYZ. That seems so unfair, and they understand on one,
oh yeah,
specific.
they'll understand it on an individual level, but like, oh my God, it can't be systemic. That would be impossible.
They hate systemic issues or whatever, so it doesn't achieve anything. It's a very special episode that we've
Yeah,
all grew up watching, where the conservative or jerky character realizes their secretary or off employee is secretly living in the back room and has been homeless for a while, and that changes how they view homeless people. They've had their awakening. This very special episode doesn't really hold up for true Republicans. All they do is just make exceptions, and then their
yeah.
general rule of the world will prevail. Um, I had written about our favorite. No, I say this ironically. One of our favorite bigots out there, Laura Bobert, and how no one should declare their sexuality until they're 20,
Until they're 21.
and they've passed like a civil, it's like a civil servant exam or something, that before you can
Yeah.
become. It's very frustrating, uh, because I'm in my late 40s, and just I thought we'd gotten past the point of sexualizing gay people, and that the ways that children are exposed to heterosexuality, and it is not sexualized. It's just like, this is a couple. This, Disney, this children's film targeted at 5-year-olds will show couples who are
Yeah.
heterosexual holding hands, even kissing and affection, and it is not hardcore pornography. But we've certainly gone back to that as any reference to homosexuality is an escalation of sexuality. So there's sort of
Yes.
normal
It's
sexuality.
inherently pornographic or
And,
obscene. Um,
um, so that's where Bogart's talking about, because I'm sure, talks to her sister girl, oh, I love my husband or my
yeah.
partner,
Well, I
and use
mean,
terms
I
of
don't like it when people like shame her for this particular thing, but she, did become pregnant as a teenager in high school. Now, I personally don't think that's a great plan, and that is why I support comprehensive sex education. Perhaps if she had gotten some things would have been different. But, for someone who actually literally like did make a way more adult decision as a teenager than she should have, she knew that she wanted to have a baby. She can't, but yet she can't imagine that other people could know things about themselves until they turn 21, which is weird.
You've got to be at least 25. You have to be able to drive a car, be able to rent a car, and then know that you are gay or trans. Those, which is fundamentally untrue. If you exist in the world, right, there's always been it's but trying to debate it on a fundamental issue of what's true or not is like pointless. These people
this is the thing. They're trying to push it into this category of it's, a sexual fetish so that it's okay for them to discriminate against or have an issue with otherwise. It's the same thing as to them, they're trying to make it like, oh, well, I'm not into a balloon fetish either, or something, and trying to equate it with that. So it's something like, it's just a matter of personal preference whether or not you think these people should have rights.
Absolutely. And to marginalize them, keep them away from children, anything that has status of being a family person. You can't be Mr. Rogers, but you can be Madonna in the 1980s if you have an alternate sexuality. But a bisexual Mr. Rogers is inherently wrong because that is supposed to be pure and good. But if you want to turn on, Cinemax after dark and watch something, that's fine. And that's just completely sort of demonizing any sexuality that's not their own, which is predictable. Earlier this week, I'd written about how Politico had hilariously stated that just like this is 2021, that Republicans were retreating on their opposition to same-sex marriage. And of course, during the Supreme Court confirmation hearings for Ketanji Brown Jackson, they were pretty clear about their coming after marriage equality and that it was so unfair, which is, that they were suddenly saying that this law makes everyone with their sincerely held bigoted beliefs feel like bigots because even though 70% of the population supports same-sex marriage. And it's not surprising, and we've talked a bit about this, there was somewhat, maybe they were like, okay, we're just going to because they're terrible people. It's like, okay, we're going to demonize trans people. Not, there are no openly trans people working with us or contributing heavily to us. Whereas, there are a lot of, there was long-term Republicans, there are people like Tim Miller, Josh Barrow, who were open and part of the Republican establishment. Except what happened to those people post-Trump was that they, left the GOP,
or they went full Milo, and he ex-gayed himself. So
he ex-gayed himself to be able to fit in that world because he understood what was happening, and obviously, to the degree that Democrats are hemorrhaging, and they've been doing this for years, hemorrhaging white non-college educated voters. The Republican Party has been losing white, college educated and or suburban voters, and not all, but a good number of gay people were part of that they were losing. So then there was like, well, what's the point? Why don't we just double or nothing with the Bobarts, with the bigots? They're the most vocal, and that's what they've been doing, to sort of do the red meat to their base. So it's not a surprise. It's just, to me, we relitigate 2016 a lot, but I think the point that needs to be the complete failure the media had. You can read some articles. It's just astonishing. So stuff like literally April of 2016, Maggie Haberman for the Times had written a piece about how Trump stood out as different on gay rights. He was at Elton John's wedding, and he was like, love is love, who cares? He was completely going to be part of he wasn't Cruz, he wasn't Rubio, he wasn't Jeb. They were presenting him as more moderate than Jeb on gay, on these social conservative issues. He's the New York kind of guy. And so a lot of average voters, and I knew a lot of gay folks, especially in New York or whatever, who considered Trump, they were rooting for Trump because he was less dangerous, seen as less
Mhm.
dangerous than Cruz. Except, by June or so, Trump had picked Mike Pence, of all
Yeah.
people, as his.
Yet they still excuse that as, oh, he's just being smart by like bringing in that base, so that those people don't reject him.
No, no,
He's
no.
not going to let Mike Pence do anything. The thing with Trump is that it is a constant game of improv. Like it never ends. Everything is yes and. He says he's fine with gay people. The Republicans go yes and. Anything he says, it's yeah, I'm still president, yes, and also the Space Force is going to come and prove that the election was stolen from you. It's constant. If no matter what he says, they will just go along with it. But since he hasn't been saying anything about that for a long time, they've been sliding back into, oh well, gay people actually maybe shouldn't exist.
Well,
Like,
also, he's that there's no reason. I mean, he just builds it up in a critical race theory and whatever. And he hates, I mean, to the extent that he perhaps did not have the overt animus when he was running towards gays as people like, Cruz and others. He has always been transactional. So it was always going to be his benefit. Like anyone, if you're a marginalized group, you
and
go,
it didn't end up benefiting him that much.
yeah, just
So,
just just screw them over and appeal to. I mean, Phyllis Schlafly essentially passing the torch
mhm,
to Trump when one of her last acts on Earth before moving into hell was to endorse Trump over Ted Cruz.
mhm.
Which, again, if you have to pick the two, surely, I mean, pick Trump over Cruz, who's the worst. But she endorsed him, pretty much saying like, yeah, despite everything, despite you being this, never even trying to pretend to be a pious person like
Mhm.
Cruz, you're been married multiple times, you're, been in penthouse, you've been running um, casinos or whatever, but you hate the right people, and that fundamentally
Yeah.
revealed this was all about. It wasn't about we're getting behind a Billy Graham or a Mitt Romney or someone who presents the way, lives the way we want to live. It was just like we just want someone who's gonna be this fearsome.
He's gonna hurt the right people.
Yes.
It's
So
not even about hate. It's those people are gonna be in pain. Um, or we're just not gonna have to acknowledge their existence, which they would also prefer in general. It's, when you think about it, they're so angry. The thing they're most angry about in the entire world is the term woke, which really, on a very, very basic level, just means paying attention to things, which I think so much of their shit is just like, well, why can't I just ignore all of the things? And that's really
you
what so much of this comes down to. Like, they don't want to, they don't want their kids to learn about racism. They don't want their kids to know that gay people exist. They want to live in the dark. They're
yeah,
happy there.
one gentleman had rambled on about this on Twitter. I think it was on Parker was Red, but he was whining about how, this, because if you dig down to it, when they talk about, and this is a challenge I think some Democrats have in responding to it or dealing with the issue of critical race theory, because it's like, oh, of course, no one's teaching you that you are lesser than because you're white, or that you have a collective guilt because you're white. But ultimately, if what these people objected to was just even an honest account of history, because unless you teach it in the sense of, well, actually, Black people were kind of swinging from trees in Africa, maybe we did them a favor. This is stuff that I was taught, mind you, in schools and stuff. Like basically, oh, it's not the worst thing. And look, and now you're an American and it's all of freedom and you've got Christianity. It's great. Unless you're teaching that, like it's a fundamental,
Yeah.
like our country is built on exploitation of others, the slow torture and dehumanization of others. And we aren't necessarily, the American myth cannot bear that scrutiny. So, like, you talk about patriotism and nationalism, it's not so much when you talk about artists of like, okay, well, I like that this person created this work of art that I like. I don't necessarily appreciate what this person did in their private life. Um,
Yeah.
we have, we have trouble with that. We have trouble with it, and it can be complicated when they're still alive, like with Bill Cosby and others. Of like, oh, I don't want to support this person, but I think also there's a sense of when I'm laughing at this person, am I
Complicit.
complicit with it if I'm
Yeah.
enjoying, and also because art makes us happy, right? So we feel a sense of appreciation. We admire these people. We feel like, thank you, this person. I have a tough life. I sit in. This person is funny and enjoyable, and I
Yeah.
like this person, and I want to have this good feel to be able to shut that off. And so it's a very difficult. It's
Yeah.
just always been difficult. So the idea of, okay, well, maybe Thomas Jefferson's wonderful, and maybe he did. I mean, there was propaganda even in the mid '90s. I don't know if you ever saw the film Jefferson in Paris with Nick Nolte as one of the worst
I
cast.
did not.
Yeah.
I think I'm aware of its existence, but I did not see it.
No, I saw it was, yeah. So Thandie Newton is Sally Hemings, and it's, you try to present this as somehow a relationship as opposed to, I mean, ultimately sex trafficking. I was in a
Yeah.
conversation with someone talking about
Oh yeah, they tried to make it into like a beautiful romance for a while, for sure. Like they were in love.
and when they talk about, it sounds terrible. You think of these people, especially as like these different countries or people like very wealthy oil barons. They bring young girls in and they do these
Yeah.
things. And it sounds awful, like this person's a monster. And then you actually dig deep into like, well, isn't that kind of what some of American people did for a long time? They were, then they'd go over and have sex with some of these against their, obviously, but there's no consent or heavily coerced. Essentially, it's sex trafficking, and they would create more of them to continue the abuse. It's horrific.
Yeah.
Like, to try to look at, and it's not just sort of, okay, well, they're like these oil bear, over here, but also they talked about freedom and it's wonderful. And let's go watch 1776. It's very hard for America to do that. So you have to have a conversation about it. And with our growing awareness, which has been knocked as wokeness, right? So
Yeah.
if you were in school now and this issue comes up, you would be like, well, wait a minute. Did the wait, one of the third president raped a woman and had sex with her and kept her in captivity and then like said, I promise I will release your own children if you continue in this relationship to me. I like, he's terrible. Isn't the expectations the teacher's going to somehow try to rationalize it, either
Yeah.
not talk about it at all or rationalize that it's not rape. Like there's no, and I feel like there's no, like I said, I'm getting at, there's no discussion of like, how do you even teach this, as opposed to just saying, well, let's just, okay, well, why don't you just watch Hamilton? Daveed Diggs is awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
He is.
And let's pretend.
I had a very big crush on him, so like
Wonderful. I was rewatching Hamilton recently, just focusing on the around.
okay, hold on. Is there ever a point in your life where you were not just watching Hamilton recently?
Probably not. My son loves it, so it's been our family movie nights a lot is to watch Hamilton.
Fair. I also watch it a lot, so
My cousin is a performer in Germany, and they are doing a. He's been cast as Jefferson, and and so we're trying to somehow get a point of being able to get out there and see him. He was also Caiaphas in Jesus Christ Superstar. He's has a wonderful baritone. He's awesome.
I
But
love a baritone. You know how I love a baritone. That's awesome.
yes,
I like the idea of Jefferson as a strong baritone. Sorry.
he's quite the performer. Very excited at the chance to potentially to see it. But yes, it's she's DeBose from West Side Story
Mhm.
is plays Sally Hemings and plays a lot of the roles. So it's fun to see her in that. She's amazing. She won an Oscar. I think a lot of folks for the same role that Rita Moreno had won, and a lot of folks have not actually been talking a lot about this because obviously the Oscars became a
Yeah.
explosive issue for many other concerns. I've written some about this.
Yeah.
I think on Monday, you and I both we were kind of like, what is all the pearl clutching?
Like,
I
really, I think that if Will Smith really wanted to knock him out, he probably could have.
well,
Also, like,
if it
I
was,
don't think it was that big of a deal. I literally do not.
what if it was that actually? You, I don't know if you saw this. This was Katie Porter's sister is a doctor, and she had tweeted this whole thing about how what if it was Betty White?
Oh,
So
yeah, I saw that.
Betty White was
Like,
still
that
alive
would make no sense.
and
There's no.
specialized in insult humor.
What if it was
And,
this completely different situation entirely?
and he slapped her. Well, also, it's like, lady, you're a doctor. You have school. You have to understand how dishonest that argument is. Like, surely there was a class you took about like building and how fundamentally dishonest it is, because it's sort of, it's like defending your client who's murdered. It's like, well, yes, yes, my client is a drug lord, but let's say, for the sake of argument, it was an elementary school teacher on her way home
from helping the poor.
and my client shot her. It's like, oh my God, yes, you must fight guilty. So I thought, I always found it fundamentally bizarre that everyone was how obsessed people got over this. It's been clear that this was not going to be some sort of open season on people slapping at comics. I wrote about this, like Joe Rogan and Jimmy Dore, all it's like, oh no, now when I insult a woman in an audience and she, her boyfriend will feel compelled to come and attack me. It's like, well, I don't think so. And maybe
also maybe don't do that.
Maybe don't do that. Maybe I've been at places where, guys like that have heckled. I mean, calling people the fat pig, and that's worse of these things is, well, maybe you deserve, because I'm sorry to take a step back.
Sometimes,
the whole
some
bullying
people need to get hit now.
idea that I don't support violence, but I do think words can be a form of violence. We've often agreed about that and what you can how you can hurt people. And yes, I am relatively quick-witted. My clients were all acquitted enough that I could reduce someone to tears. And the idea is that, okay, for that to be fair, this person I'm reducing to tears, she or he can't physically react to me, even a small slap. They need to respond in kind with fellow free speech and also get at me. It's like, well, that seems also kind of unfair because it's sort of biased towards my particular bullying skill set. And it's also not realistic that, I mean, everyone react like when they were calling it an assault. And look, I know legally that's the case, but have you ever been in
I will say the reaction to an Italian newspaper's Twitter feed was very different. It was very mostly pretty like pro Will Smith.
Well, yeah, because it felt like people.
Those are the only foreign YouTubers I read, but
suddenly they're acting as if they have not existed in the world prior to this. They've come from a different planet, and it's like, well, haven't you been? If you were at a bar, we've been in clubs, and I'm not someone who hung out in the dives. I've seen where someone talked crap to someone, they got either pushed or slapped. This is going to be very combining a lot of news stories. So when Eyes Wide Shut came out, I saw Eyes Wide Shut in a New York theater.
Oh, okay, sorry. I was going a totally different
No.
with that in my head.
Not an Eyes Wide Shut party. I was watching the film and was very confused. But anyway, I was watching Eyes Wide Shut, and a couple had brought their child to the film, but under a year old. Babysitting is expensive. They presume the child was sleeping.
Yeah.
The child started kind of crying, asking for mommy and whatever. And one guy got very angry and started yelling at the other guy for making too much noise and shut the baby up. And there was an altercation in, far more than a slap or anything. But it's just a sense of, I think we've all witnessed this, of somehow this will occur. doesn't justify it, but it seems like Will Smith's reputation took a hit. They're shutting down production of certain film, but people like really wanted the like, okay, he must have his Oscar taken from him. He must have without having any sort of context about, well, Polanski still has his Oscar and Harvey Weinstein still has his Oscar. It's like, okay, well, that's different, and
I mean, they were actually convicted of things. Like this, here's my thing. Like, okay, say like every time, like with cancel culture and everything, people are like, okay, well then, like, how do you decide? How can you just decide people are guilty in a court of public opinion? And you know what? That's fair in certain contexts. But when they've actually been convicted in a court of law, rather than the court of public opinion, then you can start taking it seriously, I say.
Sean Penn was, I think, not convicted, but he had struck Madonna, which was a capital offense, and then he I think he did time for slugging a photographer. I've often commented that I think we value comedians more than photographers because no one likes paparazzi. So just the idea of someone slapping a paparazzo, it was kind of like, okay.
Yeah.
But there's this
it's satisfying. Here's my thing though. As far as like words and violence and what have you, I tweeted about this. When I was like 18 years old, I was in a show, and the choreographer, who was actually a white woman, was a total bitch, and I made fun of her poorly drawn on eyebrows. And I had been around a lot of poorly drawn on eyebrows before. It was, just assumed that she had shaved them off and drawn them on. That was a thing I've seen people do. But in this case, it turned out that she had alopecia, and I felt terrible. I still feel terrible to this day. I apologize. It's on my list of things that like wake me up in the middle of the night feeling horrible. I would rather someone have slapped me in the face over that like I'd rather she just slap me in the face rather than the guilt that I carry with me to this day about that.
But Robyn, you need to be able to fearlessly push the line and occasionally cross it as an artist.
That was an asshole thing of me to do. Like I was being a shitty person. Yes, I was annoyed by a choreographer. No, I didn't need to make fun of the way that she looked, even if it was something that I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have said it anyway. It was shitty, and sometimes you say things and you don't realize that you're hurting people, and then I don't know.
No,
it's worse.
Well, I remember there was this interview. It was a trans woman and Ben Shapiro, and they were discussing, and obviously he was being terrible. He misgendered her for the entire interview.
Yeah.
He kept calling her man. And you could tell he is hurting her.
Yeah.
But she is larger than Ben Shapiro because she's, in the 90th percentile of people who are, taller than Ben Shapiro. And she does the thing where she puts her hand on his shoulder, which is, again, if you've lived in the world, a non-sheltered world, this is kind of like, watch it. This is the beginning of like, but at the same time, she's at close to tears. And he, of course, later was going to I think, threatening to press charges because he felt attacked or whatever. And that has always stuck with me of like how cowardly. It's sort of like the idea of how you play the game of the dozens, which is so much psychopathic, which is the idea of like the winner is the one who insults someone's mother enough that you get angry. I've broken you because you've gotten angry. And if I'm a sociopath and I probably don't care about my mother, your mother insults will bounce off me. This all happening with Chris Rock is sort of fascinating because
that is not how things worked on the last season of Real Housewives of Potomac.
Because Smith has a history of pretty misogynistic routines,
Yeah.
and he took
He
a
also has a history of saying really shitty things about Jada Pinkett.
specifically her, but his whole thing was about
I kind of loved it. I'm not gonna lie. I did. I like that he stood up for her. I think that is actually very awesome. I don't
well,
know. I'm a
and
horrible person.
I like to get to that because what bothered me so much, I saw this a lot online, was it's one thing to
Mhm.
be, okay, you shouldn't do this or whatever. But I felt like a lot of, I don't like the term white feminist, but try to, as a shorthand, their
Mhm.
immediate sense was that, oh, this is evidence that he beats her. So it wasn't even just, I disagree with how he responded to
Oh,
protecting her. I'm going
mm,
to deny that he was even trying to protect. I'm going to remove any sort of well-intentioned meaning, because there's ways that you can protect and do it in a bad way. But I'm not going to acknowledge that humanity. I'm going to leap. E. Jean Carroll did this, and some others of
yeah.
like, you know, saying that you did something out of
I
love, that abuser,
that you know. I'm sorry.
like really, that felt like, why are you going that direction without actual
That's
evidence?
not okay. It's not okay to like. I don't know. I don't think that it's a good idea to go there in general. I think physical abuse is a pretty big deal, and to just like accuse someone of it because you've got a sense,
Well,
that's sort of psychotic. I like personally, I think. I
I
don't.
agree, and it's, to me, disingenuous, because again, we live in a world, we all know there are people who have, and they should not have, gotten in scuffles with people, right? They've gotten
Mhm.
angry. No one believes that this person, if it was in them, I've not, but others who have, oh, well, obviously you go home and beat your wife and kids just because someone pissed you off and you got into a fight.
Yeah.
Like, that's not how the world works. And to your point, that diminishes actual abuse.
Yeah.
And the idea of, why not just give him the benefit of doubt, if you must or you don't have to, but at least be like, he shouldn't have done it and end it
Yeah.
there. But that bothered me, the idea of, why do you need to make it this huge thing? There were tons of these pieces on it of how he's suddenly the worst person in the world.
It's so
And
ridiculous. It's just it's too much. And by the way, can I just say, Mr. Chris Rock, type in Chris Rock cancel culture, and you will endless articles of Chris Rock complaining about cancel culture. I would like to see Chris Rock stand up for Will Smith in this particular instance and say, you know what? We should not cancel him because I, Chris Rock, am very opposed to cancel culture.
well,
I would love to hear that.
it's only one way. He hasn't apologized to Jada Pinkett Smith. He hasn't,
Yeah.
like, the idea is he has the right to say this, and no one has the right to. The only way to respond, maybe be able to insult him back, but
And to write some thoughtful tweets about the matter, maybe discuss it with him over. No,
something that he had done. I remember someone, when shortly after this slap had occurred, someone referenced of like, okay, Will Smith shouldn't have done this, but I understand, which references sort of one of Chris Rock's breakout performances, the incredibly misogynistic OJ I
yeah,
Understand routine, where he spends about 10 minutes demonizing Nicole Brown, who was murdered just 2 years before the
yeah.
routine. He basically sets it up as, she's this horrible person who dared spend OJ's money and drive OJ's car,
Oh,
which
I did not see that, I don't think.
is not how alimony and divorce settlements work. Like, it was her money and her car, but he was setting this up as, she's this horrible person, and OJ, she took all his money, the alimony made him crack, and I'm not saying he should have killed her, but I understand. And that was sort of to the point where the audience is like, kind of how the call response goes, where they're actually saying, but I understand. So he gets an audience to basically empathize with someone
Oh,
murdering
wow, I really did not ever see that.
a woman. Yes, it's one of
I
his,
thought I'd seen like most of his
it's
specials,
one of
like,
my favorite. You can find it. I just find that
yeah.
it's horrific as to what, I mean, it's horrifically misogynistic. It's terrible. I mean, he has a history of this. I don't cancel it. I mean, Chris Rock's, I consider an influence, someone whose work I enjoyed. But
I mean, he's brilliant, but he's also sometimes an asshole.
yeah,
Like
so
a lot.
recognize that things are wrong, and like I should probably maybe not do this joke. I mean, he's to be, as you were saying, with cancel culture, he's more inclined to be like, oh well, I used to be able to make this joke, and now I can't. Boo hoo hoo. As opposed to,
Well, yeah, unless you're Henny Youngman.
that stuff's gold. That lasts
Yeah.
forever. That lasts forever.
Yeah.
But it's the fact that people kind of want total extinction for Will Smith, a total cancellation for him, does resonate with, if I've obviously I'm not a I took I took the advice of being a lover, not a fighter. So I don't slap
Yeah.
people, those sort of things. But I do think if you are a Black person
I
who's
have.
I have been slapped,
Yeah.
I have deserved it. Because
Yeah.
I mean,
No,
because
the bitch I slapped absolutely deserved it.
I made
And I
this
do not regret it.
I made this person cry because again,
What did you do?
I could probably dismantle someone with my words. It's the ability, which is again a form of violence. You can be cruel. You can go. It's like finding nerve endings, right? Except you're not
Mhm.
at physically. You're going at what makes someone weak, and you make someone, and then
Yeah.
and that response to me is an emotional response, not justifying violence, but like
Yeah.
you're
Well, you go
someone is
like
so
going for the jugular, I think is always like that is just as emotional of a response as slapping someone in the face. Because I've gone for the jugular verbally and I've slapped a bitch in the face who deserved it. Actually, I've slapped two people in the face. I will tell you the story in a second. But
this will make our highlight reel on Instagram. It's just you.
I think so. No, okay.
I'm sorry.
But it comes from the same place. It really does. Like it comes from the same like point of rage. And my temper is 1,000 times better than it used to be. Like I had a problem with my temper, which really makes me feel like an ethnic stereotype. But because every time I'm like, I'm half Irish, half Italian, people are like, oh my God, I'm scared of you and your temper. And like, yes, you probably should be. But it comes from the exact same place. Saying something really cruel to someone and going for that. Sir is so cute today and every day.
Thank you.
I, however, look like a haunted Victorian doll, and I'm cool with that. That's what I was going for.
Awesome. Continue.
But it's I don't know that saying really horrible things to people is like not equal to slapping them in the face, especially if you're slapping with an open hand and not punching.
Well, it is being cruel, and the idea that it's somehow art. So when these hack comments, like, it's not even like I've inadvertently insulted. I'm sure and stuff I've written, we've all written, and I apologize if I've done it proactively. But it's to me, it's not like trying to explore the line or try to do something. And I've probably done something stupid, but not in the sense of I am deliberately trying to insult someone or be a jerk. Or when Chris Rock was like, you know, introducing the documentary things, like one of the winners, Questlove and three white guys, and actually one of the people who won is South Asian, and that's actually a big deal to have won the documentary, and he diminished it.
Yeah.
Very upset. So I mean, try to be aware of what you say is not the worst thing in the world. I remember, and a lot of folks, again, Chris Rock should always worry that his biggest offenders online tend to be a lot of white conservatives, but their big thing was like, remember when the good old days where Ricky Gervais would come out and insult people and the audience.
Well, they love that clip of him with Louis C.K. Using the N-word. They're like, oh my God, this is our beautiful dream.
But Ricky Gervais, his big moment in that clip that keeps getting circulated is him at the Golden Globes basically asserting his free speech to tell celebrities not to use their free speech. Because he was saying that you guys are all a bunch of sheltered celebrities and this goes back to, I would say, for me, growing up, Tim Robbins and Susan Sarandon, this idea of
I thought it was going to be Michael Moore, but I guess that's
how dare celebrities come up and say anything about it's so shallow to go and be like free to bet or this issue
Yeah.
concerns me and to use your time for that. Just go up, thank your agent, and go cash your money. And to me, is an inherent cynicism to that because yes, Ricky Gervais is an empty, soulless person who
Yeah.
doesn't care about anything in the world, and he's funny. That's fine. Like I like the original Office and extras, and there are certain things,
Yeah.
but he is not. He doesn't
I've never seen extras.
he doesn't care about anything. So you have to sort of, oh, when Jessica Chastain is talking about, I've won for this, and Tenfei Baker's cared about LGBT people, I'm going to dedicate this to marginalized people. The idea that that's somehow roll your eyes about it as opposed to being, well, why not? Why is it not a bad?
Or
Why?
people thinking, how is that like less weird than or more weird than people thanking God? Like, thanks God for this award that I got, that you made happen with your magic powers. Thanks for giving me an award, God. It's not like you have anything better to do, like, maybe taking care of those marginalized people or the people of Tibet, who's still, not in a great situation.
Yeah, it's not that the worst thing to sort of show concern or empathy for anything. But the what's one thing that's fascinating to me is again, as I was saying, if you live in the world as a Black person, it feels as if your support is very conditional. Just one
Mm-hmm.
mistake, it's one strike and you're out in this world.
Yeah.
And this seems to what like this the a lot of the rhetoric again predominantly from white people. So more about people, it's like, oh, he effed up, but he's still the same Will Smith who was
Mm-hmm.
this guy. And so he effed up. He's human. And that
Yeah.
is a more complex reaction. But specifically from white people, it tends to be, oh, either all of this no longer matters or it was all fake, but this is who he is, this violent,
Yeah,
bad.
this one particular, you at your worst moment is exactly who you are forever. No, and I don't even think that's his worst moment. But well, I mean, I don't know him well enough for that too, is what I'm saying. Like, I'm sure he's probably had worse. I've had worse. But like, it's so crappy. I also think it's
It
like
doesn't
ridiculous. He has to like, put off some Netflix show. He has to resign from the academy. This is too much. I'm sorry. It's too much.
And when we talk about racism,
Yeah.
remember the idea of not question, because to me, when someone is like with Amy Schumer's and other people who I know, I could find the receipts of defending Louis C.K.
Mm-hmm.
exposing himself to women, people, all this sort of stuff, saying, well, that's not the guy I know. He's not just, as you're saying, this is a bad thing, but he's not, and he should still be able to do his work. Now are kind of like Will Smith is all entirely
Yeah.
this bad thing. And I was having this discussion online is that often when we talk about racial discrimination, racial prejudice from school, the prison, the school, the
School
prison,
to prison pipeline.
and we
Yeah.
talk about just racial discrimination in the workplace and everything, often it's the idea of like that, oh, a racist person is just picking on an innocent, saintly Black person. And what the reality is that more often than not, kids screw up. So the Black kid
Mhm.
did screw up. The Black employee did come to school to work late or did screw up a project. But what happens is that,
The consequences are way more severe.
and there's never forgiveness. Whereas
Mhm.
like they won't even think of like, oh, well, wait a minute, this white person has been late multiple times or
Mhm.
also screwed up a project or also effed up. And so the fact of like not being, Jesse Williams had said this, which is just white supremacy is premised on nothing can remove white people's humanity. Black people have no humanity. So it's very conditional. And so that becomes it's like,
Mhm.
no, we're not saying that he's perfect. We're saying that he screwed up, and we should put that in context with like your embrace of Mel Gibson and other celebrity. No
Yeah.
matter the worst thing, Mel Gibson was still getting work after like some of the most, you know, abusive women, anti-Semitic statements and whatever, and people are still like he gets defenders like Jodie
Yeah.
Foster's or whatever, and who would really like you get someone like Jodie Foster to come out and would defend Mel Gibson at his lowest. And I don't see like where are it's like white Hollywood's like, yeah, you slapped a
Yeah.
guy, F you forever. And to me, that's a it feels how it is to exist in the white
Yeah.
world. Like you make that one mistake, buddies, friends, it's like you're on your own. Um, and that's just very disappointing. It's absurd. So
Yeah. I don't like it. I don't like any of it. It's
a lot of people like, well, what about S.E. Cupp is a political commentator,
yeah.
conservative. She's just like, but what about the trauma of those at the Oscars who saw the slap? I'm like, but like, didn't they ever watch Dynasty? Like, how I don't understand. Like, I mean, again, like I was talking about kids. Well, no, kids aren't watching the Oscars. For one thing, no one wants. But like the idea of like, now I'm gonna go slap. Like, I don't know. Bree was slapping people on Desperate Housewives, and
Yeah.
like Amanda got slapped on Melrose Place. Like the slap is sort of this universal thing that kind of happens. No one has
Nicolas Cage got slapped in Moonstruck.
yes, snap out of it. Like, so no one ever thought that this is an appropriate way to resolve conflict. Um, but it is fascinating because it's, I think, what is actually somewhat satanically tempting to be the Black conservative is a degree of weird protection you get from the worst people in the world.
Yeah.
It's like being a made man. So, like, Clarence Thomas is awful. Like, what he did is fundamentally terrible, right? Like, but, Mitch McConnell, the Wall Street Journal, everyone's, no, Clarence Thomas is a wonderful, thoughtful jurist, which he's not. And they kiss his butt about, but he's reliable because it's like he, of course, that's just his wife. He was never just a support for this guy. Even I'm like, wow, these guys come out for their boy. And I can't. I'd be surprised to find one white liberal who's come out supportive. Like, look, Will Smith, he's made mistakes, but that Fresh Prince episode really made me cry once, and so we'll give him another
I have
chance.
absolutely cried at an episode of Fresh Prince, and we actually talked about it recently, and I can't remember which one it was now, but yeah, very emotional sometimes.
There were multiple very good ones, but yes, there's but yeah, like there's Clarence Thomas has gotten a lot of support from that. I feel like if he was a Black liberal justice,
Oh,
the
absolutely not. No.
situation, like the Manchin and Cinema would already be calling for his.
He's forgiving as someone is useful.
Yes,
Like,
it's always a positive thing, right? So
yeah.
But I do want to. I'd like to get back with the time remaining about what's happening and with. I do believe this is what Republicans have really been pushing for, wanting to roll back the clock and rolling. And whenever people describe it as they're just doing this as a distraction, one, that annoys me because getting slapped is not a scrap. So, like, literally being hurt, these are human lives that are being hurt right now. That's not a distraction or anything. That is violence being done to these folks. Laura Ingraham and a lot of Republicans are kind of like, well, what needs to happen is we need to have war against Disney, which is always fascinating. They hate whenever corporations, who are people, express their First Amendment rights and talk about, no, that's gross and we don't support it and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly because, well, Republicans have power through an effed up electoral system. So they have gerrymandered maps. They have Senate, which is biased towards white voters. They have voter suppression laws. They have all this, but like Disney has to deal with the real world, and which most people aren't homophobic and vicious, and so if it's going to be Disney will prevail in the sense of most of my will support me standing against these awful laws. Whereas you can get away with hurting these people and you don't have to have any sort of accountability from voters because God help who can vote in these states, right? But we will see. It's just very fascinating. They're threatening to screw over Disney. Laura Ingraham
Laura Ingraham was her. She was like, "We're coming for you, corporations!" Like,
it's like very like they're
we're going to do antitrust now. We're going full Elizabeth Warren. Like,
we're gonna burn down the corporations. It's like it's their right to do that. You helped create a corpocracy, and JD Vance the same thing. He had the shot chaser. I think it was Parker had posted this. The shot chaser of him saying Disney's overruled.
oh yeah,
Now I'm gonna sit down and watch Star Wars with my kid. It's like, well, Star Wars, Disney owns Star Wars. Like this is
the thing. Republicans have always been mad that they are terrible at boycotts. Like they're not good at them. Because what they end up doing is they buy the stuff and then throw it out their window and make a video of it. So that's not really terribly effective as a boycott. Also, they're not a super desirable demographic, so a lot of the time companies don't care.
Yes, it's very it gets no longer want to watch us is not the most.
Yeah.
We no longer Marjorie Taylor Greene is not going to do a screening of the Black Panther sequel is fine. No one is going to be that wounded by this. Yeah, it's also because it's most of the book, as you were saying, it's like they do it and then they don't read the fine print. So it's like, I'm boycotting the company, and it's like, well, they also make like 80% of the stuff that's in your house. You just thought it was just this one thing. And
let me tell you, boycotting Nestle is not easy. You have to know all the different things. Like, because they own 80 bajillion different things that do not say Nestle on them necessarily. Like, you have to actually when you boycott, it has to be strategic, and they're not very good at that. They're also not good at pleasure, or what am I trying to say? Delay of gratification. Like they're not good at that. They want what they want when they want it.
The Montgomery bus boycott was like a year, so I don't think they're not going to go a whole year of not watching Marvel movies. And a lot of these folks, their most hardcore fans, hate. I mean, Disney is so built into Florida. Disney could move. I mean, it's very hard to be like, oh, we're going to move Disney World, right? I mean, it's not going to most likely not happen. So I think DeSantis believes he can call their bluff to a certain degree, but you never know. Maybe they'll move to a different state. Maybe they'll move to Georgia. Who knows? Or somewhere, if they're kind of like, let's not continue offending gay people and trans people, just bullying and just being the absolute worst humans ever. It does raise the question of why we're kind of not able to more effectively run against overtly evil people. And that always becomes the question, right? Like, why can't Democrats more like, these are just the worst people? Because what happens is to get normalized. There's no
and because it's hard to sell a negative, like you can't really just run on, hey, I'm not as bad as this other person. And I would love it if that worked, but it doesn't necessarily work with real human people.
Well, that's
not good advertising.
Well, also because it's not about negative. People say, well, Republicans do it, but it's like, well, it's not just that they are being negative. They're
offering people something.
They are promising that I can protect you from liberals, from being taught about racism, from being exposed to gay people, and then they deliver. They can show it. I will stop people from having abortions. I will protect you. And so, yes, I think Democrats get upset because they're kind of like, oh, well, Miss Centrist, the lady running in Missouri, who's running on, we don't talk to each other enough type of campaign, is like, but she's not running on, I will protect trans people or gay people from others. She's more of like, let's all hold hands and we can go back to normal. And that's not encouraging. It sounds like, the mafioso, but it is a sense of who's going to protect me. It's not enough. I want to know. And that, to me, it seems as Republicans have done a very good job over the past 2 years, not
Yeah,
just hurting people of color and marginalized groups, but showing those groups that Democrats can't protect them. Either they're
yes.
unwilling or
And if
unable.
all you're offering is like you got to offer something better than they'll get slightly less of what they want if we win is sort of what
They'll,
ends up happening.
they'll hurt you slightly less. Because right
Yeah,
now, I mean, it's a very,
and they might have otherwise.
it is, I can't imagine, and this is just off my top of my head, I can imagine generally when it felt like the worst things were happening, we think of like, okay, Reagan was president, or there's a concept of, oh, the bad guys are the empire's in charge.
Yeah,
We get rid of the empire, and that's sort of a human nature, right? But right now, the idea that these horrible things are happening and Democrats are, uh, you know,
which empire?
really in charge, the evil empire, whatever. Like, so the but right now, ostensibly, Democrats are in charge. And so the perception
Yeah,
when they keep saying, well, we need to make Manchin and Cinema irrelevant and then we can help you. We just need more power. We need more help.
yeah,
Just seems weak, even if maybe it's true. Maybe if they had a couple more senators, they could do this or they could stop or pass these laws or get rid of DeSantis or whatever. But I think it is a very demoralizing because people feel like, okay, well, what more can we do? I feel like we've won the last two elections and they're still hurting us.
yeah,
What more can we do? And when people say like, well, just grow up, that's not necessarily, as you're saying, it's not particularly a compelling strategy. It's a very
yeah.
weak thing of
Well,
just,
the thing that actually does scare me, and I was going through the various clips of the Trump rally the other night, this morning. The Trump rally was last night. I was going through them this morning. And what you hear from all these people is like, he loves us so much. Like they're talking about Jesus or something.
hmm,
And, you know, as much as I don't think that that is like a great thing that happens with Trump, and it actually does scare me, people do respond to like niceness more than they respond to, well, you suck. Like they don't like, hey, vote for us because we like you is more compelling than vote for us or else you suck.
yeah.
Like,
I mean, they identify with Green as their fellow fighter, one of them, and so forth. And I think that's been a challenge. I mean, there's certainly people who stand for Hillary Clinton and for
yeah,
um, Kamala Harris and so forth. But I think it is hard to get a movement. A lot of folks who do that are not also declined to be part of a movement. Their
yeah,
reactions, so I mean, MAGA would show up and be obnoxious, but they tend to show up to more often be, you've criticized my favorite. So that's kind of different. That's more like obsessive Trek fans showing up at Star
yeah,
Wars conventions just to be obnoxious is not as compelling as being really into something and saying, I really like this. So I
yeah,
think more we can get people who would be really excited about their person.
yeah.
This,
Like I love that. I love it when people are excited about a person. I don't like it when people, hop into like if you like someone other than that person or say something nice about someone other than that person when they start screaming at you. Like that's not a good time.
no, that is
I think like stands going on offense is a poor time, especially like intra left and what have you. I don't go after anyone really, like
yeah,
except for bad stuff.
it was. I guess it's a couple of things that go on there. One is like often with cult things, you enjoy that you're part of something that maybe a lot of people don't like. So especially in the 70s or early mid 80s,
Yeah.
if you're really into Rocky Horror, for instance, you
Mhm.
understood that
I was.
not everyone else was. It was a rarefied group. And that's
Mhm.
part of the appeal. But often in politics, what I've seen personally is that there's resentment. It's kind of like the people who their kind of cult candidate they resent that it is not as popular as say Madonna in the 80s. It's like, well,
Yeah.
upset. So it's kind of like, and the people who were that way were obnoxious. So the people who weren't just happy that they liked their cult musician in the 80s or whatever, they had to knock Michael Jackson or Madonna
Yeah.
or anyone because they were very popular. And so
Yes.
anything that's very popular sucks. And my person
Well,
is
I mean, I
shit.
think that's a very Gen X thing in general. Like the whole, like anything that's, if you're trying to appeal to people, then you've already lost.
And we
Right.
only, yeah, so Gen Xers
Like
always
it's
like,
only, yeah,
I only liked the album before they got very popular. So
yeah,
there was like in
before
college,
they sold out.
it was always that they had controversy, but not 1999 or
Yeah. And,
Rain. Always the
here's,
album before, because that was
yeah,
what the real people were into.
before they sold out and before other people had heard of them. And I don't really get that as a way of being. I have actually found, generally speaking, in my life, anyone who describes themselves as an anything snob does not actually love the thing that they are a snob about. That is
Yeah,
my rule about
it,
music snobs, movie snobs, grammar snobs, whatever. Anyone who's a self-described snob, food snobs, they don't actually like the thing that they're a snob about. And they come across as not really having a lot of joy about that thing,
it's just about being
you
exclusive.
know?
I like being a geek into certain things, but liking
Yes.
something to to an enthusiastic agree is awesome. But people who are really into loving being snobs is just like,
Yeah. And I feel like there's sort of an element of that happening where people don't want to be, they don't want to be too populist. They want to be a little bit like, hey, this is an exclusive club. You should want to join the exclusive club and be cool like us politics snobs.
yes. Well,
Um,
and that's one challenge.
like,
You've written about electability, right? And
yeah,
so often with electability, this is not the side of one candidate the other, but with um, both, I saw this with Biden during the primaries and then Conor Lamb in Pennsylvania. So the candidate's like, I am the most electable, presuming that
yeah,
by that virtue of that, it's not necessarily here's all the cool things going to do. It's like more people are going to vote for me.
yeah,
And that's being proven untrue. Their sole kind of, compelling factor is gone. They go on the attack against people who are perceived as more popular than they are.
yeah.
And it just comes across as, because I think, as you said, running on electability, just say, this is what I'm going to do and get people very excited. But like the idea that I am the one most people are going to vote for is not necessarily compelling, especially right now. It just seems very removed from what is actually out there. Like the idea of like I don't know that there's a big market for even Mitt Romney's who are
No,
slightly
there is not.
and or like the lady running in Missouri, the Bush Harris,
Yeah.
who is like, well, Claire McCaskill lost. So I don't know, like, what's the now it's like, well, she's our best chance. And they'll describe all the things she can appeal to. It's like, well, you're describing Claire McCaskill who lost. And it's like, well, Claire McCaskill lost because she voted against Kavanaugh. And so what will often happen is that, okay, well, this centrist candidate can win as long as they never stand up for anything that's right, because then the Republicans will, the more Republican state will reject them. But right now we're in a war. So it's almost like we just need more soldiers. Granted, we can't have those soldiers ever like fire on the bad guys because then we would lose those soldiers. It's not a doesn't make sense to me. I mean, I get it. You don't want Mitch McConnell to control the Senate again. And I get that. But I think what we've seen with many examples is that Republicans get that we are going to, you're not going to be able to sort of hide in a corner. It's like a lot of centrists think they can kind of run as a Democrat and do like I would do when I'd have to play football in PE. I would just sort of run kind of around and make sure I didn't actually have to touch the ball, or if you held the ball, you either have to throw it, and that would be a problem, or you could get hit. And I didn't want to be part of that. So you just kind of do some movements to avoid, but you can't do that. You can't do that as that's the centrist shuffle. You can't do that and you can't go up and like you're gonna have to be like, I'm for voting rights. I think gay people should exist because I think Republicans going to force you to campaign on a sort of national level. So
yeah. By the way, I shouldn't laugh at you. I took smoke breaks while I was walking the mile. I refused to run. We would get like far enough from the teacher and we just light up, start smoking, then continue walking.
That's right. Well, I mean, the human body is capable of amazing things, including smoking while walking. Yeah, it's very interesting.
I was not a gym class star either, is what I'm saying.
High school like TV show. If you watch sort of the high school, like even gospel or whatever, I guess because of the rules, you can never show teenagers smoking. They can be doing sex or even murders or whatever.
Yeah.
No smoking, even though I think a lot of kids still smoke. But I mean, obviously, they don't want to make that look cool or whatever. So I get that. So we're almost at time. But what is what do you have that you're thinking about for next week or that's going on that could be of interest to folks?
Honestly, I am not sure. I'm gonna wing it.
Yeah, I need to look at the let's look at the news, see what's happening. Hopefully there's no more slap news. It was a very slap heavy week.
Yeah. No, I wasn't paying attention a lot this morning. I wrote my one thing, but other than that, I baked a custard.
We should do more. I mean, we could always do more recipes. We should actually do a lot.
No one needs a recipe for egg custard. It's like literally just the recipe that it is. I was, thinking of actually putting up one of my Nani's recipes this week because she did pass away last week, which was sad. But
I'm sorry to hear.
Yeah. So So I might do that at some point this week if people are interested in like wine biscuits, other weird Italian cookies. You would actually, you know what? You would like wine biscuits. They're extremely bland.
Well, thank you.
It's a joke. It's a joke. I'm just kidding. Like they're actually very good. I like them.
Next week is Easter, right? So we might not be seeing.
Oh yeah.
So maybe you should put up your Nani. So that'll be and I'll do like my usual.
Oh, I can do well, I'll have to amend her Easter bread recipe. Because it serves 12,000, I think. I tried to make it once, but I was like, why do I have 4 bags of flour? I don't know. And I just started crying. I'm not really good at baking, so it was a bad time. Well, and you? Oh, so hard to do in this reverse thing. I'm like, I have to go. Yes, that way.
I'm going to check with the news as I've written something about. I guess Biden had expressed some frustration with the pace of Merrick Garland's because very slow and deliberate. He's acting like a judge, even though, well, he was a judge when you hired him. It was like sort of I don't know what you expected there, but also, and I don't know, I am very, Haberman had about the Trump rally. I don't really like talking about the rally, so I was glad that you had done this, but she had started out literally talking about Trump is now a real candidate. He's really focused on 2024 and whatever. 3 minutes later, her next tweet was, "Oh, no, yeah, I spoke too soon. He's obsessively talking about the election again and whatever." Yes, because he's Trump. Like you need to assume, and this would be a constant, right? It was like they say,
wish I were that like I'm actually impressed by that level of optimism.
Like he's going, this is all he has to the extent. I mean, it's a disaster if he runs again because it'll be violence or he's going to steal the election outright. So neither option is good, but he's a terrible, he's just not the 2016 candidate. He's just like this guy who's just whining about, it's a very limited appeal, except he's, it's not actually going to be a democratic election. It's just going to steal the thing. So
Yeah.
since Biden's frustration of, like, he had said he thinks that Trump should have been prosecuted and whatever. It's like, yes, he's a threat to national security. And it would be really embarrassing if he's president again, as mistakes go. Just like, it's like, I don't know. I feel like there's like a dozen Fast and Furious movies, and you
Yeah.
could justify even the worst of it. Why did they make this one? You could justify that more than you could another Trump presidency. That is just like, really? Why? What has America? I feel like that should be the end.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again. Thanks for everyone for joining us. And as Robyn had mocked me before about not being able to pronounce her lovely name, she should end, and then she will say her name and then say if she can pronounce my very difficult
Oh,
name.
okay. My name is Robyn Pennacchia, and that I can't. I hate this reversing. You guys all need to follow us on YouTube so that we can stream directly from YouTube if we have enough followers, and so I cannot be backwards anymore. I would really love that. And sorry. And that is Stephen Robinson.
Bye-bye.